Good afternoon, friends. It's good to see you. Welcome. We're glad that you're here. I just really thank everyone for their kindness and prayers last week. My last Wednesday got just a bit interrupted from what I had anticipated. I had put my finishing touches on my slides. I'd got them all prepared. I was getting ready to was in the process of cleaning up to be up here, and ended up getting a call from my mom to come right away. I was already planning on going out there that afternoon, but obviously needed to go quicker. Dad did pass away that afternoon. I was really glad I was with him at that time, and I just appreciate y'all. I know Curtis did a great job, but why don't we show Curtis our appreciation for filling in. That'll be recorded, clapping. I just really appreciated him. There's nothing more funny than me being in a car driving to see my dad trying to walk Curtis through the slides I created. So if you got anything last week, it's just because Curtis is that awesome and brought it to it. But we worked it through it together, so it's good to be part of a great team. I thought y'all might enjoy this picture here. It's one that makes me smile a lot. This picture is from 1973-ish, maybe 72 still. And of course, that's me, the little one, not the big one. The big one is my dad. And that's one of my favorite old pictures. There was a great picture that we shared out on Facebook of my sister and I sitting in his lap reading a book. And there was a cigarette carton over on the kind of library stand. It wasn't as taboo as it is now. And so my sister had me wipe that out. I didn't know you could do that in pictures now, and just made it poof, it just disappeared like it wasn't there. But I couldn't do that to the wine bottle. It might have been a good bottle of wine, so I didn't want to ruin that. But this was one of the first times Mom and Dad traveled after I was born, and they made a trip over to the Netherlands, and it's a grass field. They pulled over in there to have a picnic, as you can see, because as a young officer, that's all they could afford is a picnic carry lunch. But wanted to let y'all know as well, many of you have been praying for my sister as she battles cancer. I really appreciate those prayers. She had surgery on Monday at MD Anderson. All seems to have gone very well. She's back home now and expecting a full recovery. We'll know more information on what she's battling as they're able to biopsy what was removed and know that probably sometime early next week. So thank you for all the prayers and support. And then there's one third thing, and again, I hate anything personal in all this, but I feel like I need to share it. But my son, John, did land a job. He's going to be the new director of communications coordinator for the El Paso Locomotive. And so a little soccer team out there working there at the same place where they have the El Paso what? Locomotive. Oh. Locomotive. That's the name of the team. It's a soccer team out there in El Paso. So kind of fun. Really exciting. And so he has to report Monday for work. So we're in the process of moving him out quick. But we're really happy for that. So really excited. If you know minor league baseball, they play in the same stadium that the El Paso Chihuahuas play in. They belong to the San Diego Padres, and it's their AAA affiliate. And he'll probably do a little work with them as well out there. So, but right now he's going to be working for the El Paso Locomotive, my new favorite soccer team. All right. So last week, what? I'm sorry. In the picture, were you the little kid or the? Yeah, this is me on the little kid. Yeah, that's me. And then my dad is there. So yes. Yeah, and that was one of my parents' favorite car, the old Volvo they had while they were in Germany at Bad Hersfeld and Fulda. So, yeah. All right. Let's talk. Last week I put some questions in the slide, and I was going to walk you all through why I want to suggest that what's in Luke is different than what's in Matthew, and that specifically they're talking about different sermons. Now, it may be that Matthew gathered together a group of teachings and brought them all together due to their themes, and out of a career of sermons of Jesus, he pulls them all together, okay? I want you to just think about what we have left in the Bible. Oftentimes, if you look at an Old Testament prophet, pick one like Amos, or even go to one of the larger books we have, something like Isaiah, what we gather in them is not just one message from a person in one sitting. It's a collection of what they preached over a lifetime. I mean, think about how many sermons y'all have heard from me over the last few months. A bunch, right? It adds up. And that's just a few months. I haven't been here even a year. Imagine how many sermons you've heard over a year or over a lifetime from a person. And so what we have is we have a kind of a distillation in these Gospels of messages. Now, it is likely that Jesus kind of had a bit of a stump speech, a speech he gave like at the beginning pretty regular, and it probably starts with the Beatitudes and ends with a "why don't you listen to me" kind of thing. And you can see it kind of flow out. And if you take the messages out of Matthew and you lay them side by side with from the Sermon on the Mount, and then you take the Sermon on the Plain and you put them side by side, you can see the kind of flow of the message. But I want to just point out to you some real obvious differences of why I would say I think they're actually different events. Okay? In the Sermon on the Mount found in Matthew, Jesus goes up on a hill, sits down, and teaches. Okay? 3 things that happen before any message comes out. And then the message is different than what he's going to say in Luke. In Luke, he comes down from the mountain, goes in to the people gathered, stands, and speaks. Do you see the differences? Very different in what's going on. So I happen to be one of those who would say it's a Sermon on the Plain and it's different than the Sermon on the Mount. But I'm not a big fan of synchronizing things. And I just think we're looking back at a lifetime of messages, and these are some of the highlights. I do believe that Luke is probably going to be closer to what Jesus actually said than Matthew, who's probably pulling several things into one place. Because unlike Mark and Luke, Matthew puts a lot of things that Mark and Luke put in different places all in once, because he's giving a thematic telling of what Jesus would preach. Okay? And so I just want to make that clear for you. So I had this slide here, and you probably got just a little bit. When you come with me to the Holy Land, when we can go, I'm praying for peace all the time there so I can take people back. There's this beautiful church built by the Carmelite nuns there on top of where they believe the Sermon on the Mount and Plain, all in one place, happened. That way they can sell tickets to you. Okay? And you see the beautiful view up on a hill overlooking the Sea of Galilee. The thing to know about this particular hill is that it was actually bought for the Carmelite nuns by none other than Benito Mussolini. Yeah, pretty fascinating, in 1929. And what's so fascinating about that procurement was it also just happened to be the cheapest land around. And then they kind of made it into this beautiful garden space. So we can say that, okay, somehow 1929 years later, through good prayer, they found the spot. Or we can say it's in the neighborhood, beautiful, and we can just tell the story there again, and it's still pretty awesome, right? I wouldn't get, when you go to the Holy Land, don't get too, there are some spots that we have good indications all the way back to about 60 AD. Those we'll hang our hat on. The others, don't make it a matter of faith or too, it's just cool to remember and tell the story there. Does that make sense? Okay, this is one of those places. And see, I don't know that it captures, there's the altars in the center, the church is in the round, and then it has these big, full, picturesque windows on the back that I don't know you can fully see. But when you look out of them or stand on the steps on the back where I am here, that's what you see out your window. Just in case you were wondering, this all the way down here is Tiberias. This over here is Magdala. Have you heard of Mary Magdalene, right? she's from there, and the Capernaum is right back in here. Okay, you see all of that right out the place there. The reason I love it and took this picture is because I also got to preach there. I was not obviously allowed to preach inside the sanctuary, but on my first trip over, I got to preach for Bishop Huey and a group of my colleagues that were over there, and it was about like today, except for it was raining really hard. And so they had us all outside under umbrellas. So needless to say, I made it short because I didn't want the bishop to die of exposure. That would not have been very polite. And when we got on the bus, though, the tour guide was intrigued by what I had talked about. And I want to bring it to you, the kind of theme I talked about. And that is that there is a through line from kind of understanding Deuteronomy and a moral mind of God that goes from Deuteronomy into your prophets. It's in the teachings of Jesus all the way through to the expectations of Paul. And it comes out and lives from the Ten Commandments all the way through the teachings of Jesus into how we are to live our life today as followers of Jesus and God, okay? John Wesley, called this in a series of sermons, he called it the moral mind of God, and that we were blessed as human beings to learn the moral mind of God and to allow it to guide our actions and to help us to do what was good. Okay? This is different than the following of the law talked about that is ceremonial or is somehow tied up in all these weird practices. That's kind of fluff, but there was a part of the origin of our understanding of the Old Testament, especially enshrined in Deuteronomy. You've heard it said, right? What's the end of the Old Testament? What is the Old Testament all about, right? It's about love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself, right? Who said that? Jesus. What was he quoting? Did you know he was quoting? Deuteronomy, right? And so Deuteronomy has these beautiful sermons. Deuteronomy is really a set of sermons on the Ten Commandments, and they become the moral mind. So when you look at Jesus's teaching, always look at it with Deuteronomy in mind, because he's either telling you what Deuteronomy means, or he's taking a part of it, ripping it apart and saying, no, but there's something new, okay? In Luke, he's ripping it apart and saying, no, there's something new. You ready? See, that's called a setup, where I come from, right? I'm trying to set you up so you can see what I'm talking about here in the next thing. So where we are, we just had the Beatitudes, but we also, hey, everybody wave at yay, how are y'all doing? Good to see y'all, good to see y'all. All right, so we just had these beautiful Beatitudes. Does anybody remember how they've been the blessed are's, right? Happy are these. Happy are you who are poor. Happy are you who are hungry. Happy are you who mourn or weep. Okay? Y'all remember these, right? They're right there. Also, there's a fourth one. Happy are you who are persecuted for me. Those are the four. All right. Then, unlike the other one, you hear, whoa. And it really is, the word actually sounds like a wailing or an upset. Like, ah, is what it sounds like in the Greek. So it's literally like watch out or be careful, but it's with pain. It's like with distress in the person's voice. And so then you have these woe. Well, if the poor are the ones who are happy, who's the woe for? The rich. Who is the woe for? If it's not the hungry or the happy, it's for the full. Did everybody have a good lunch? Right, right. So it's woe. Woe to you when I speak, then those who are mourning. Then it's those who are laughing. Now the funny part here is the laughing really means laughing kind of at someone else's expense. The word isn't just to ha 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 ha, have a fun time, or it's really laughing where someone else is the brunt of the joke, or you're happy that they got what they deserved, right? We've never done that. We would never do that, right? And then you get, woe when all speak well of you. Some people love to tell me how highly I'm regarded and how well people think of me. But they hadn't read this verse. I think about it every time. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for that is what their ancestors did to the false prophets. I mean, ouch, right? But then here we start today with this kind of odd thing. But I say to you who are listening, like, huh? So blessed are you, blessed are you, blessed are you, blessed are you. Woe, 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 woe. Okay. I mean, he's saying, you've heard these things. You should know these things. I'm telling you now something more than that. And it is different, guys. So Matthew, remember, is kind of taking Jesus and helping him be approachable to primarily a Jewish audience. Luke is taking Jesus and trying to make him approachable to Theophilus, or the Greek or Roman intellectual world, to get him in there. And he's very clear here that now I'm about to tell you something that is very different. And how do we know it's different before he said a word? My friends, he's standing. He's standing with them in the middle of them. That's not how you teach in the ancient world. It means you're with them, not having authority over them. It's very peculiar. And then he says these things. Here's what he says. Love your neighbors. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. I mean, dang. I don't want to do that. I want to hate the racist. I want to fight the oppressor. I want to overturn the system of injustice and disregard the people who implement it. Don't you? I want there to be bad people. Like, this is no fun. I don't get to hate back. They get to hate, they get to be mean, they get to do all these things. And I've got to do what? That's wrong. What is he talking about? He's talking about something different. You've seen what the other produces. It produces us and them. It produces a mindset that says some people are unclean while we're clean. It creates boundaries and barriers and says there's us and them. Aren't we so good? We don't have to worry about the bad. We're going off in our own direction. Jesus says, that's wrong. That's wrong. No, we are our sister and brother's keeper. We are responsible for other people. We don't get to just walk by. If I haven't learned anything else in this last week, it's how precious people are and how we can't let anything keep us from loving people. They're not problems to be solved. They're not issues to be fixed. They're not even political operatives, even when they want to be. They're human beings who have sacred value to God, and we have to find a way, even when we can't stand them, to love them in Jesus' name and to let that break through over whatever any other feelings we have if we want to be followers of Jesus. We literally have to pray for those who mistreat us. Okay, isn't that hard enough? Oh, thank God we're done, right? No, it gets worse. It gets worse. Hey guys, good to see y'all back there. It actually gets kind of tougher. I mean, if that was just it, I think we might say, okay, we need to love. We need to try to do that. But it goes even further. If anyone strikes, because then it gets specific, right? If someone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. From anyone who takes away your coat, do not even withhold your shirt. Give to everyone who asks of you. If anyone takes away what is yours, don't ask for it back again. Let them have it. Because things aren't as important as people. So how do you think that goes in 21st century America? Right? Like no, it's mine. It's not yours. You know, I earned everything I have by the sweat of my own brow. Nobody gave me a darn thing. That's a lie. It's not that we didn't work hard. It's not that we didn't earn what we have. There's value and dignity to work. I just celebrated my son getting a job. Heck yeah. Heck yeah. I'm a capitalist at heart. I love being able to do things. However, never think we could do anything on our own. Without God, without family, without support. Nobody's a lone island. Even those stories that you hear about of self-made people had people who helped them, who made the way for them, got them where they are by either inspiration or relation. We're not alone entities. It's a different mindset that Jesus has. Now, I have mentioned at this point, before you think, I'm just reading what Jesus said. I'm just trying to translate it into language you can understand. If it doesn't rub you wrong, then you're not really hearing Jesus. He is a first century Jewish man talking. It should be hard for us from our mindset to get back to that. So keep thinking. So you think it gets better or worse after that? Worse. Here we go. Y'all ready? Y'all read, Luke? Spoiler alert. It goes further. It's the worst one out there. Do to others as you would have them do unto you. Man. But no. Can't I have a shell company that protects me from actually having to be responsible? Can't I have a government that does the things I don't want to do so that I can act like I didn't do it or wasn't part of it? I mean, can't I be part of a system that does things, that oppresses, that performs injustice, and in times is even willing to do what is evil? Not if we take our baptism vows seriously, that we will, you remember it? We will resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves. In the United Methodist Church, that's what it means to be a follower of Jesus. You can't be baptized or join the church without avowing to that. It's been that way since '68. So some of you might have been born before then and baptized before them, but I know you've said it every time I've baptized somebody else, right? It's important that we find our way to avoid those things. How many of y'all learned the golden rule in school? Anybody? Anybody? It was great. There was a philosopher at the University of Texas in my freshman year who, the freshman philosophy class, the whole basis of the class was learning to treat other people as they treated you. I thought that was really kind of clever, the way he framed the whole thing. But the challenge today is that's not how we live. We've created a world that's so complex and difficult that we might kind of in a little sphere find a few people that we treat nice and do well to and treat as us because we see them as fully human. But we live in a world where we want all these other people to be invisible. We want to walk by them without seeing them. We don't want to really have to bear that burden. And so it's a bit of a challenge. You think it gets easier? Or you think it gets worse? You ready? Listen to what Jesus says. Even sinners love those who love them. Right? If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you, it should say. If you lend to those from whom you expect to receive payment, what credit is that to you? And after each one, he says, even sinners do those things. To be a follower of Jesus, to be a disciple, to be a person who seeks God, we have to go beyond. We have to lend without expectation. We have to do good with no expectation of acknowledgement or return. And we have to love those who don't love us. It's the hardest thing ever, right? It's funny, in church work, one of the roles we have is we have to write acknowledgement letters for gifts that are given on the behalf of the deceased. How do you think Jesus would have felt about that? Does that jive with his sermon? Well, kinda. But should the person expect a return or thanks for what they do for God? What does Jesus say about the tired slaves when they come in from the field? Servants, right? He says, which one of you who has a servant tired after a day's labor with you out in the field doesn't expect the servant to still cook your dinner? That's when his disciples said they were tired and they wanted a little help from God. We have this picture of Jesus being like the ultimate nice guy. But no, he was the ultimate worker for God. And the kind of part about this, again, I'm all for, I send these really nice letters and do it up. But I'm just saying, have we in the modern church created a culture which has the opposite expectations of what we should be doing? Where we try to expect too little of followers of Jesus and think that it's better to not have any requirement just so people might occasionally want to show up. But what we find in sociology, it's really true, is that the harder it is to be part of something, the more coveted that thing is, right? So I would say maybe we need to kind of emphasize some of what it means to be a Jesus follower a little bit more, based on this sermon, at least what I see in the red letters, right? You ready to keep going? Do you think that gets more challenging, or? Golly, here it is. Woo!
Yeah, really. Peace out.
Yeah. Everybody left at this point, for those still with us on YouTube, and they got up and walked out. No, I'm just joking. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful is his key point. And then he tells us how. Do not judge. Do not condemn. We have to find a way to forgive. We have to find a way to forgive. The saddest thing I could think of is to maintain hatreds and broken relationships and to not be reconciled and forgiven before leaving this world. Life's too short for that. My dad, in his passing a week ago, it was such a blessing. All the grandkids, me and my sister, my mom, were all able to be there with him. And there, it was almost as if he had just waited. And then 2 hours after we were all there, he left this world to go that other place. But it was just an extreme blessing. And I thought, how amazing was it that we were all reconciled to one another and to him. I've seen so many times where in end of life and funerals, people are able to really realize what matters and move past the perspective that has kept them in hurt and pain. But I think there's such an important part here of kind of what we need to do as followers of Jesus to keep our eye on the prize and not be distracted if we're really going to put our mind where we have that moral mind of God with us. He then tells us here in this same little message as we're coming to the end of chapter 6 about parables of sight, fruit, and foundations. I don't know why they go together. They seem like different things, other than they're very concrete examples. You've heard the saying of the blind leading the blind. You find that here. You've heard about take the Don't try to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye when you have a log in your own. I think it sounds better in Greek and Hebrew than it does in English, the log in your, but I've heard it sometimes said a plank in your own versus the little toothpick in somebody else's. Hey guys, good to see y'all. The other parable is about, you'll know the tree by the fruit it bears. And there's this kind of understanding of you'll know that. But this is the part of that parable that I really like in Luke. It really kind of clarifies. It talks about the treasure of goodness in a person's heart, and that out of that treasure of goodness in their heart comes good deeds. And likewise, there's kind of evilness in a person's heart that makes evilness. And it's big on, it is out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. It's out of where your heart's disposition is that actions occur. When you're good, you may be able to be bad for a moment, but you're going to come back to doing what's right or good because you're going to see or witness the pain your action causes. And you're going to seek what's good. Or at least I hope so, because sometimes I do mess up, right? But it's there. And then there's the foundation of the rock versus the no foundation. It's kind of interesting, in Matthew, of course, you get built on rock, built on sand. But in Luke, it's one's built with a foundation and one is not. And it's not rains, it's actually a flood kind of comes up against it. A dam breaks and a flood comes. It's just a little different, but it's important. Ready for the next thing? It's the worst one. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I tell you? Watch out, friends. Praising Jesus with our lips, but not praising him with our hearts, will lead us in ways we don't want to go. It's out of the heart and the intention and the will and what you do that God measures. I heard it said like this one time. It was actually by a Catholic priest told me this. He said, if you really want to know what someone believed, look at their check ledger. Look at their day timer. See how they spent their time and their money. It will tell you what really mattered. Not what they said they wanted to believe, but what they actually did. That's kind of the point here. So that'll cheer y'all up and give you something to worry about all day. But I bring that forward just to say the challenges of us following Jesus are all the time, but it's really about an orientation toward the love of God that comes through a different perspective. And so I've got some questions for reflection, but I want to close with this prayer I read to the staff, and I don't want to ruin my sermon for Sunday, but it's just on my mind, and I think it really speaks to it. And see if I can't zoom in a little bit. No, it didn't want to let me zoom. All right. But this is from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. You may remember him. He helped participate in the plot to assassinate Hitler. That did not work. And so this was before that time. He's still over in London at this time where he had fled. The first time he was kind of getting in trouble with the Nazis, and he was preaching in London. He's talking on Remembrance Sunday and talking about the transformational power of our faith in front of death. But I think the thing we underestimate sometimes is how this radical power that we have due to Jesus by following what he says to do, how it not only unlocks kind of death, but it also unlocks this life. So listen to what he says about death here. No one has yet believed in God and the kingdom of God. No one has yet heard about the realm of the resurrected and not been homesick from that hour, waiting and looking forward joyfully to being released from bodily existence. Whether we are young or old makes no difference. What are 20 or 30 or 50 years in the sight of God? And which of us knows how near he or she may already be to the goal? That life only begins when it ends here on earth, that all that is here is only the prologue before the curtain goes up, that is for young and old alike to think about. What are we so afraid of when we think about death? Death is only dreadful for those who live in dread and fear of it. Death is not wild and terrible if only we can be still and hold fast to God's word. Death is not bitter if we have not become bitter ourselves. Death is grace, the greatest gift of power, if only we realize that it is the gateway to our homeland, the tabernacle of joy, the everlasting kingdom of peace. How do we know that dying is so dreadful? Who knows whether in our human fear and anguish we are only shivering and shivering and shuddering at the most glorious, heavenly, blessed event in the world. Death is hell and night and cold if it is not transformed by our faith. But that is just what is so marvelous, that we can transform death. And he goes on to then explain what Jesus is and what Jesus has done. I just thought it was just a beautiful thing. I wonder, though, like, do we believe in a transformative power of God? Like, do I believe that my enemy can be redeemed? Do I believe that the desert will burst forth in life and water, as Ezekiel says? Y'all have heard that passage, right? I mean, do you believe that even you can become a good and moral person because of what Jesus is and who Jesus has done? The challenge to these kind of things that Jesus tells this crowd is that they're hard to do. You can't do them without God's help. You can't do them without resetting your perspective to have God's perspective. But if I've learned anything this week, it's that life's too short not to try. So how do you practice the golden rule in your life is kind of my question for you. That's the easy one, right? I would also say, how do you practice that through your stock portfolio? How do you practice that through how you treat people in Walmart or the store? Did I ever tell you about the church member in a church one time when I was there to help unload groceries on my first day at that church? Okay, so people were driving through doing a really good thing, and they were dropping off groceries for our food pantry at this place. And I had decided that it would be a cool thing for one of my first things to do is to just go help unload things, get to know some people, get to see some people. And so this lady pulls up and she's like, "They're in the back." "No, not those, the others. Grab those." No. Do this. I mean, that's how she spoke to me the whole time. And stuff everywhere. The next Sunday when she saw me, she burst into tears. Yeah, because she realized that I was the senior pastor. Like, why would she treat anybody like that? Why would she treat? Yeah, I mean, but not knowing isn't okay. Because Jesus knows when we treat people like that. Right? Anyway, I loved her. We had a good relationship over time, but it was just a funny start. Where do you need to give mercy to others so that you can receive mercy from God? The other part I was even being nice. I didn't even tell you that Jesus makes all the blessings conditional, in that if you aren't merciful to other people, you don't get any mercy. Have you ever said the Lord's Prayer? Yeah, double check it. How does it say we'll be forgiven? Well, like we forgive others, right? Do you really want to be forgiven like you forgive other people? I mean, I'm not a bad person, but oh my gosh, I need to check some things, don't I, right? It's kind of tough. Do you do what Jesus tells you to do, or do you just call him Lord, Lord? I think that's American Christianity's problem right now. We do a lot of calling him Lord, Lord, and not a lot of doing what he told us to do. at least Luke doesn't have, you'll be thrown into the outer darkness and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's in Matthew and Mark. But there we go. Well, we made it. I hope your faith is intact, but I also hope you feel challenged. If you don't feel challenged, to try to seek the perspective of God and to think about either the golden rule, mercy, or how do we do what he said we should do, then I've failed, and I have office hours, and you can come see me, and I'd be happy to meet and work with you on that. But I just want to be really, really clear. I'm not presenting this as something I do well. I'm trying to present to you the struggle I have with some of what Jesus said. But I think it's good that Jesus wants me to be a little uncomfortable and not think I've made it. I think it's good that Jesus calls us to do more than we might be able to do. That way we kind of take our time to really depend on God to help us. So why don't we close in prayer? Eternal God, we ask you to pour your Holy Spirit on each one of us, to embolden and empower us to be servants of you, to spend our life and who we are in ways that make a difference in your world, so that when our day comes, you can look at our check ledger and our calendar and see what really mattered in our lives. Help us to love those others would forget. Help us to care for those other people don't see. Help us to have mercy always. And Lord, help us to even love those people who seem to be doing awful things even to us. Help us to find love, for it is only through love that this world might be transformed on earth as it is in heaven. Help us to let your moral mind live in us through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Well, friends, I will stay and answer any question. I think I did. How did I do on time over there? I got that about right. Good, good. There's got to be some questions on that. That's all juicy. That's all juicy. Yeah, it will.
If that doesn't wake you up to the need for grace, I don't think anything will.
Right.
Because I know how bad I am at all those lists of things that I need to be doing.
Right. Right. So it wakes us up to the need for grace. So I think that's right. I think, though, the problem I have with that interpretation of this part, I think that's right when comparing it to the law. The problem when comparing it to this part is that's not what Jesus says. He says, many are going to call on my name and get nothing because they didn't do what I said. So for this part, I think the challenge is people who are hearing it have already been healed and they've already been forgiven of their sin. So now what? How many of you have been baptized? Right? How many of you have found a relationship that's meaningful in your life because of the church? Right? All of y'all, everybody, just for those on YouTube who can't see that, everybody raised their hand. So the question is, now what? Are we going to settle with being the same people we were before? And I think you're right about grace, but here's the twist I want to put on it. Okay? Or are we going to let the grace of God work in us so that we are merciful and have grace for others? You see, there's a movement that happens. Probably the best book on this is by Henry Nouwen, where he talks about the return of the prodigal son, a painting by Rembrandt. And in it, he talks about how in that painting it's unusual that you get all three characters at the same place, because to do a painting of the prodigal son, you got to put them all in the same painting, right? But he says that each of us is everybody in the story at least once. But that the movement we want is to become the Father, the one doing the forgiving and the mercy. And that's kind of the movement. So I agree with you, yes, the need for grace, but I'd also say what grace can do. Because I think some of us see grace as like an entry point instead of that movement toward sanctification, that movement toward being made holy, that power that God can work in our lives to give us an ability to do things beyond what we would be able to do without God. I mean, it's an interesting thing. How many of y'all know the island of Crete? Anybody has ever heard of the island of Crete?
I've
It's out there in the military. You've been there? Yeah. Did you know it has got one of the highest percentages of Christian people in the world? Right, about 97%. There's not that many people that live there. In Roman times, what did it mean to be a Cretan? That you were bad, a scoundrel, evil, and worthless. Somebody shipwrecked on that island. Do you know his name? It sounds like all and starts with P. Right? Paul. And through the power of the Holy Spirit, what happened? Churches started and people eventually, and it transformed who they were. English coal miners were some of the worst people on the planet until the Methodists taught them to read. Then they got bad again later. But anyway, they kind of lost what the Methodists did. But the Christian movement changed lives. Men put down the gin bottle and started bringing the money home. Kids got educated to learn how to read, and suddenly they became engineers. Grandchildren of people who were converted in the field actually ended up doing that. Like, what do you believe about the transformative nature of God? Has our experience of the church in North America at this time been so much in decline that we have forgotten the transformational power of God? Have we quit looking at the perspective of the eternity with God in the few moments of this life, so that we fear to do those things of great risk because we're afraid of what people will think? Well, one of y'all can get really mad at me, and that lasts for what? A second in eternity, right? Come back. I'm still going to love you anyway. But, oh, friends, the things we should do for God. Did I hit the thing or something? Did it have a timer on it? Sorry. It feels like it lost us something. Is that right? Okay. Anyway, other questions? Great question. Thanks. Let me just riff off a question. Some of y'all got other questions. Come on. Isn't it horrible when Jesus breaks it down into the details? Oh my gosh, if I went into the detail of our life, wouldn't that be awful? Oh man, Sunday would be like, you better bring your steel-toed boots. We're going to jump on toes. Yeah.
I am reminded, this whole line of thinking, I'm reminded of the story of the Good Samaritan.
Mm-hmm.
And Good Samaritan, those words don't go together.
Right.
Good Jew.
Right.
And what other stories did Jesus share with us that you recall that the same idea?
And here you're saying the same idea being the inclusion of Gentiles, or are you saying the inclusion, or are you saying this idea of kind of a moral mind or doing what's right?
Moral mind of God, doing the right thing.
Oh, right. Well, so let's see. Doing the right thing. So like when he's with Martha and Mary, that'd be a great example. There would be, let's see, doing the kind of parables or teachings about doing the right thing. I mean, golly, and it's in Matthew, it's in Luke, it's also in a lot of Mark, but every time he talked to the Pharisees. I mean, like that's something maybe I didn't focus on enough today because I really think it comes into next week's kind of last lesson. But this is where the Pharisees lose their mind because they think he's their guy. Oh my goodness. And he talks like one of them and he sounds like one of them. And oh man, he'll even he went and got baptized by John the Baptist. He's one of ours. And then they hear this stuff of, blessings and woes, and they're like, oh, that's why we love Jesus. That's why he's our guy. And Jesus then says, oh, but let me really tell you where the rubber meets the road and where the hard part is. Oh, dang it, I thought I liked him. I thought he was one of ours. But then when it actually gets tough, they're like, oh, I'm not sure I can do that. I'm not sure I want to do that. The ways of the world are more powerful. So every time Jesus talks to the Pharisees, I find it amazing. It doesn't matter what gospel you go to. His hardest words are for those who should know better. He never disparages someone who we would call a sinner. Right? I wish somebody had told that to Mr. Blowhorn guy who went on University of Texas campus with a big billboard. His name was Bible Bob, and he would blow whistles at students and point and yell at them. But that's not what Jesus was at all. That is a horrific caricature only available to us in 20th century America at the time. It's a horrible thing. So, other stories where Jesus said that. I think, why would the father run to the son in the return of the prodigal son? Why would the shepherd leave the 99 to go find the one? Why would that lady stay up all night searching for a coin? I think you can find it in all of his stories. I think that the challenge we have is we don't think he can do that through us. Because he just doesn't know Aunt whoever like I do. She's mean. Don't you know her? Like, Brad, you're joking, right? I gotta be nice to her? She does harm through her words. Why can't I just be mad back? It's a tough thing. Don't we want to just be angry back? Jesus doesn't want people following him who don't want to transform the world. Selfish people are not invited. If you think your happiness is more important than what God might do, because you think this life is all that there is, you're missing the point of the gospel. I didn't say be unhappy. Like, it's important to do that caveat. But if you're tempted to give up on somebody, don't. I'm only here because there were some people that did not give up on me. So, what other questions? Yeah, the problem about this was it's too understandable. Like, I wish this was in like the Hebrew part, and there were a few words that were a little bit like, oh, well, we're not really sure what this means. Like, give me some wiggle room, Jesus. Don't make this part clear, for goodness sakes. Now, I want to just bring something to you. Like, you may have a group that you think, I don't like this party or that party or group of people or whatever. I can just tell you, they're not as bad as the Romans. Remember who he's saying this to. They're not as bad as the Romans. And he's telling the Pharisees, who want the Romans overthrown, that they need to be loved. Man, dang it. That's tough. Bonhoeffer, I picked him out. His guards would apologize when they locked him in his cell at night. There's a story that one of the last acts of his life was to do communion for a group of Christians, and it was a Catholic family that asked him to do it. Now imagine Catholics asking a Lutheran to serve communion and do Mass for them. And you know what he refused to do? He refused not to invite the guards to partake. There were Nazis, right? They killed him. And he would not serve communion without serving the ones who killed them. What does it mean that Jesus served communion to Judas? Have you ever thought about that? So Billy Abraham, my dear friend and my advisor on my doctoral project, he said, if Mao Zedong, who had it was a little Irish brogue, right? So he would do this, who had an army of 10,000 virgins that he could, do all these things with. If Stalin, who killed these millions, if they are on the plane to heaven, if they have a pass, I'm giving my ticket back. He never could, but it kind of made the point of God can save whom God wills, not just who we wish He would. And if grace isn't pretty, I don't believe God will bring people who don't want to be with God to Him, because that would be so you can choose not to go to God. But at the same time, what do we do with a God who's that crazy? And it's back to Jonah and Nineveh, right? Like, what do we do with a God who spares Nineveh? They shouldn't be spared. But maybe if they shouldn't, then I shouldn't either. So be merciful as your Father in heaven is merciful. Now, that doesn't mean be taken advantage of, right? But it does mean find some room in your heart for those that they get you the most riled up and pray for them. That's a tough ask today. Some of y'all think I'm being political when I say that. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But you judge. Yeah? Darling?
You know, it's difficult because there just is so much hatred, but we just have to think that God is bigger
Yeah.
than anything. A friend of mine in the Chicago area said that there was a church in her area that had the sign, the entrance to heaven has requirements and rules, hell has open borders. And, there was a big, people tried to get the
Yeah.
pastor to take it down, but he wouldn't,
Well, maybe he could only go through open borders.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think the reason we have a lot of non-Christians in the world is because of people who think they're following Jesus but not really reading him, right? Now, to be fair, they'd probably say the same about me, right? Because they just read it different. I think, though, what I would challenge is what's the antidote to fear? What is the antidote to hate? What breaks down walls? What do we really believe? People have found that in our culture in this time, you make money by making old people afraid. And that's why you see it on your TV all the time, on your phone when you bring it up. People are profiting by other people's fear. And it's how people cash in. I think we have to be very careful as Christians in this cultural context to be able to make sure everything we do is out of love. And it's tough because sometimes we're navigating tensions and challenges that are competing interests, and we have to adjudicate on what will further love. I mean, I understand the complexities of running things in large organizations, and it's not easy. But to do things out of love, to do things out of that good place, and to allow mercy to win is something important. I heard a story that I really like, and I'm not sure if I've shared it before, so if I have I told you about the guy who went to find the Wesley revival in Wales? The newspaper guy? Oh, okay, well good. Here you go. I can never remember where I probably tell this one too much. But I had to do a little research on this guy, but he was an interesting guy. He wrote for the New York Times. He was an avowed atheist, had maybe agnostic, but he had decided he wasn't. He fell in love with a Greek Orthodox woman, and she was quite something. So he began going and sitting out in the car while she went to church on Sunday morning after they'd been out on Saturday night and stuff. And finally, he kind of came in and began to sit in the back. And so the guy was a bit of a rascal, and they didn't know what to do with him. And, he was he kept falling in love, and he decided that he needed to join the Orthodox Church to do that because she wouldn't marry anybody who wasn't Eastern Orthodox. Okay? So he went through the process, and he met with the priest of the local church, and they got to know him and actually began to find some faith. But when he got to the part of the virgin birth in the creed that he would have to recite at his baptism, he couldn't say it. And he's just like, I've found so many good things, but I just can't do that. And so the priest reported him to the Cosmopolitan, the kind of their version of a bishop, and they brought the bishop down, and they were working with him and stuff like that, and the Cosmopolitan just got a big smile on his face and said, well, that's why we all say it with you. We have faith for you when you don't have enough faith for yourself. Right? I was very proud of my mom, who was able to go to church on Sunday for the first time in a long time in person, and the power of that. But one of the things I had told her was that, Mom, if you can't sing or say the words or do a part, isn't it amazing that the church does those things for you? Sometimes We need the faith of our friends. Do you remember that part in Luke? Like, don't throw that away, right? It's the faith of our friends and the grace of God that get us over the finish line. So I think you're absolutely right about grace. I just want to make sure we're having grace press us on to do what's right. Because I also live in a land where some people think, well, if I just say the right word, then me and God are good and it doesn't matter what I do. That's bad. Yeah. Yeah. All right. All right, well, some people don't want to ask questions in public, so I will sit down there. I'll answer any questions, and we'll go from there.